it going, guys? I want to get another video up this week, so I decided to do a gaming spotlight video on another game that I've really been wanting to talk about. But before I start, I wanted to say thank you first and foremost to whoever my third subscriber was. I know 3 subscribers isn't exactly any kind of landmark, but whoever you are that recently subscribed, I sincerely appreciate it, and I hope you somehow caught a video that convince you to subscribe. I also wanted to sort of apologize for making these videos in seemingly random locations in the house. It's usually just a matter of convenience and whatever place is most quiet, so I know this isn't the most visually stunning place and backdrop to see while someone's talking about video games, but it is what it is. So this gaming spotlight video is going to be on a game that I finished quite a long time ago. I beat it probably a little under 2 years ago. But when I first started getting back into console gaming, I made a list of games that I had either played and wanted to beat or had never played and wanted to beat. And then sort of started to work my way through them. And as I beat this games on that list, I jot down notes and write a couple things down in like a general score of what I thought of the game, just because I thought it'd be cool to look back at the end and really kind of get a sense of the things I had gone through. This is one of the first games on that list, and that game is Alundra for the PlayStation 1, which came out in '97, so it's quite old. I don't have a physical copy of it. I actually did when I was younger. When it was released, I owned the game physical PS1 discs, but when I beat it most recently, I beat it the downloadable version from the PlayStation Store, so I'll throw up a little image of the cover art into the video so you can see if the actual imagery jogs your memory, but I'm sorry I don't have a physical copy with me. I'm going to go through the game and try to, in the same manner that I did Final Fantasy VI, and try to make the review and the overview of it a bit shorter and sweeter than the Final Fantasy one was, which was quite long, but I'll keep the general format the same. And the first aspect that I talked about and will continue to talk about with games is the story. And Alundra had an awesome story. As per my other gaming spotlight video, I don't want to get too much into a ton of depth and a lot of spoilers and a lot of moment to moment parts of the game. I want to talk just more about the overall feel and the bullet points of the story. Story in Alundra focuses on a self-titled protagonist, Alundra, who is a silent protagonist. Very similar to Link from all the Zelda games, and this game has often been compared to old school Zelda, so it's really no surprise. But you play as Alundra, who is a member of a race called the Elna, which is a race of sort of elf-like beings who have the ability to enter people's dreams and affect people's dreams. And in the game, Alundra is drawn to this small town that's been terrorized by all these horrible visions and nightmares, and it basically becomes your job to help rid them of this unseen force that is giving all these people these horrible nightmares and visions and other things. And your goal in the game basically becomes to affect what's going on in the real world, but also kind of cure these people in their dreams and get in their head and figure out what's troubling them. And the thing I think I liked the most about Alundra for sure was how incredibly dark the game was. Like I said earlier, this game is compared usually unfavorably to A Link to the Past because the visual style and the mechanics are so similar, and even though Link to the Past came out first, this didn't come out so much longer that there weren't people that were still kind of looking at them simultaneously. But I will say this game is a lot darker than any Zelda game I've ever played. I know Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess are both pretty dark games, but Alundra, I can assure you, is darker. The game kind of deals with a lot of really interesting themes of sacrifice, personal loss, faith. It's not some crazy X-rated, horrible, nightmare-inducing, grindfest type game that's going to give you nightmares, but it's dark in the sense that it doesn't pull any punches with a lot of tragic and really heartbreaking moments in the game. There's a lot of death, sometimes involving, young people, kids. It really isn't like a happy-go-lucky rainbows and sunshine type of game. It actually, really deals with this town that's been ravaged by this horrible, unspeakable evil, which is essentially this demon Melzos, who, without spoiling too much and getting too much into the game, but essentially the people of this town had come to worship this being as a god that was actually sort of a demon, and it causes them all kinds of problems down the line when their faith starts to waver. He kind of comes back and makes them rue that a bit. But yeah, it's a really awesome, really dark, really thoughtful game. It's not, it's another case of a silent protagonist coming in as the hero and saving a put upon town, which is hardly a groundbreaking plot for a game. But what it lacks in originality, it makes up for in atmosphere, in emotionality, in a storyline that really isn't afraid to question some really fundamental things like, what like blind faith and things like that. So on a purely storyline angle, not groundbreaking, but deep, dark, eerie, and certainly something for all ages, maybe even too mature for young kids, but it's a game that it's deep enough and dark enough that, people my age or even older aren't going to find this to be too kiddie for them. That I can absolutely assure you. The next thing is gameplay, and this is where the comparisons to Link to the Past are most apt and most obvious. I mean, it's a 2D action adventure game with platforming, combat, and puzzles. So, comparisons are going to be inevitable. But I'll tell you what, this game is hard as hell. I've never prided myself on being someone who's really seeked out and beaten games that have reputations for being incredibly difficult. But I can say that of the games I've played, the modest amount of games I've played and beaten, this is one of the hardest, if not the hardest I've ever beaten. The combat is, you get a wide variety of weapons, both melee and ranged, some spells, some tools. The combat is kind of what you'd expect it to be. It's a attack in different directions while you're running around. A wide variety of weapons that you kind of learn to use and learn what situations are useful for. Certain weapons are better against certain bosses, that kind of thing. You need to use certain weapons and tools for certain puzzles. Burn stuff down, place bombs to blow stuff up. If you've played an action adventure game, you kind of know what you're getting. The combat was fun, was somewhat challenging, but pretty balanced and overall very responsive and cool. But it's the puzzles and platforming in this game that are insane. The game's really balanced in terms of there's a fair amount of platforming, puzzles, and combat. It never felt like you were doing just one thing. But the harder platforming and the harder puzzles in this game are tough. Like tough as in some of the moderate ones took 10, 20 minutes to beat, and some of the harder ones I just said screw it and looked up a guide for. I really did make every effort to get through everything I could in the game on my own, but some of the harder puzzles, and people that have played the game, some of like the ice block puzzles where you got to push ice blocks around rooms in certain orders to allow yourself to enter new areas are just so, the number of combinations you can try compared to the one that you have to get right are just unfathomable. So I got certain ones on my own and felt really accomplished, but other ones I just said there's no way. I could be here for playing every night for a week and never beat this, so I'll just look it up and admit that the game kicked my ass. The platforming's more sort of once you kind of get a better sense of how far you can go on ledges and timing and that kind of thing, you really start to get better at. But there were sections of platform where you got to jump from platform like long. You're on waterfalls moving down. Like it's not only time, it's space, it's timing. It's a lot of. Platforming is platforming. If you've played games with platforming, you don't need me to explain it to you. But bottom line is, this game is one that it's fair, so you never feel like you're being cheated. But it's one that when you accomplish things and get things done and beat puzzles, get through crazy platforming sections, beat bosses, you will be like, shit yeah, because it's hard. I'm sure there's people out there that have played it and thought, this is a piece of cake compared to some other ridiculous game. But for me, I thought this was a hard game. But rewarding hard, not frustrating, turn the game off hard. So overall, gameplay, very balanced. Combat has a wide variety of weapons and stuff, but for the most part, you know what you're getting. Platforming and puzzles, pretty diverse, but also range from simplistic to insanely hard. So if you want to play this game, know that you're in for some hardship there. The visuals, really kind of an old school throwback. 2D, really clean looking, very very nice looking game, but nothing really earth shattering. The color palette's pretty muted. This isn't a game that I think people would probably be drawn to specifically for its visuals. But that said, the character models, the animations on the attacks, everything looks, clean's the word I keep coming back to when I think about it. It just looks really pleasant. It all plays really smooth. It's very fitting. They do a really good job of the visuals playing into the grim, sort of eerie, ethereal feel of the game. There's a lot of the environments for the most part are pretty dark and creepy, but they do range from big mountain top type things to in general, if you've played really any Zelda, you know what you're getting. You're getting caverns, you're getting castles, you're getting a town called Inoa is basically the main town you're in and keep coming back to throughout the game. But it's it's a 16-bit or 32-bit. It's a 32-bit 2D action adventure game. They didn't try to reinvent the wheel here. They basically just made a really pleasant, crisp, nice looking game that does everything it's supposed to do, but isn't going to blow you away. And then as for the sound, this doesn't have one of my favorite soundtracks in gaming, but the music is great throughout. And there's 3 songs. The main theme in Inoa Village, where you spend so much time there in the game that the theme just kind of, you end up hearing a trillion times. The Inoa Village theme has this really catchy, really memorable sort of like funky, rhythmic, like Eastern sounding vibe to it that's very peculiar because I don't know. It's so different than the rest of the music in the game that it really stood out to me. And then there's one dream you go into for this guy named Klein. The soundtrack song is called Klein's Dream. That's awesome. And then the last song in the game, which sets the stage for the final boss battle, is incredibly epic, orchestral, builds in the perfect way up to the finale, and it's just terrific. It's one of my... When I made a video back about my top 10 favorite gaming songs, that was number... I can't remember what number it was, but it was in my top 10. So those 3 songs stood out to me that I'll spotlight. But for the most part, the music is really, really good. It tends towards somber, understated for the most part, except for the village theme, which is very... The village and the ending theme, which are very sort of energetic and in your face. But for the most part, it really does a good job of matching the visuals and the story of being sort of this, sort of... somber. Somber is a good word. This very somber, sort of on edge, reflective, a lot of piano and like wind instrument type vibe. So, great sound, limited sound effects in the game, but what is there is fine. Overall, not a selling point of the game, but good. So in summation, Alundra is an awesome, awesome, awesome game. It was a game that I played when I was young. I owned it when it first came out. And for some reason, all these years later, I remembered just enough about it and remembered liking it just enough that I decided when I downloaded it and finally beat it. And I'm so glad I did. It was an incredible game. This is going to make me completely lose all credibility, but I've never beaten A Link to the Past. So I can't truly compare the two in terms of which one I like more. I have played A Link to the Past, never beaten it. But it's hard for me to imagine A Link to the Past really being far superior to this. If you're looking for a good 2D action-adventure game, I'm not really sure how you get much better than this. It's hard, but not unfair. It looks great. The sound's great. The story keeps you intrigued throughout, and the story is so dark and horrible at times. Horrible in terms of what's happening to the characters, not horrible as in bad. What happens to the people that you care about in the game is so horrible that it makes you want to succeed, because you want to find out why these things are happening, and then, you know, freaking destroy whoever's causing it. So it basically exemplifies what I would think people would be looking for in a 2D action adventure game. So glad I picked it up. It was cheap on PSN, and overall I just had an absolute blast with it. So I couldn't recommend this much higher for this style of game. I'm gonna give it a 9.1 out of 10, an A grade. Definitely look it up if you have any desire to play it whatsoever. I'd recommend it for old school Zelda fans. I'd recommend it for fans of really... See, I'm trying to think of other things to really compare it to. And I know this was sort of a pseudo-sequel to Landstalker, if you're familiar with that title from back even previous to Alundra. But I feel like this style of game has so few notable examples that if you're looking for something like this, I can't really imagine something you'd enjoy too much more. So, 9.1, awesome game. Let me know if you have played this, what you think about it. Because I know it's not an overly popular game, but the people that have played it seem to love it. So I'll keep cranking these out as I go through the list of stuff I've beaten, and then as I beat new stuff, I'll make some videos about that too. So thanks so much, guys. Appreciate you watching, and talk to you soon.